The tragedy of Marcos, a Mexican immigrant. Marcos, my dear friend, I told you not to get too close to them. Now look at you, lying dead in a pool of your own blood. No one back home will get news of what happened to you, for when the police pick you up, they won't be able to identify you. You are an illegal immigrant, my dear friend Marcos. You're not in their database. You've kept yourself off social media, carry no ID, a search for your fingerprints and dental records won't come up with your name. Your mother will keep praying for you for years to come. Her hope is that you're not dead but in a prison. She will console herself with this idea, since it's a painful one, yes. But it's better to be in a cage than stiff underground. This way, you're expected to come back someday, which is better than you being gone and having no grave. The Americans won't care about you, my dear friend, but your song is known to us, your countrymen. We understand the hunger you faced as a child, trying to focus on school with an empty stomach. We also remember the tears of our mothers at night as she wondered how she would make ends meet after the death of our fathers. Likewise, we remember the manly advice of our grandfathers, preparing us for this cruel world. But most of all, we know the feeling of leaving behind everything you know and travel north to be able to make a little bit of money and finally eat well. You worked at a turkey farm for a few years, making $15 an hour. At first, this seemed like a fortune, but you soon realized there wasn't much left after you spent on basic necessities. Impotent rage took over you, knowing that no matter how hard you worked, you weren't moving up in life. But you swallowed that bitter drink, for that is what men do. They endure what they must. Eventually, an old co-worker of yours is seen in a party. You notice how well dressed he is, the beautiful girl grabbing his arm, and how confident he's become. He used to be a nobody like you, and now the others have made a circle around him, laughing and paying attention to everything he says. You want to talk to him, but oddly enough, a sense of shame enters you. He's a boss now, a patron, and you're just a pawn. But he also was a pawn once, and maybe, yes, maybe, you'll also be able to get crowned like him. You had loaned him some money a few times when he was in need during his days of poverty. And with this knowledge, you told yourself it was justified for you to go approach him since he owed you one. And since he owed you one, you did. He was incredibly friendly to you. It was as if you were a long lost brother. He explains to you how he got out of poverty by running some errands for some powerful people. You knew the dangers of organized crime and had attempted to stay away from it your whole life. Your grandfather explained to you how those who enter the business do not get to grow old. Your friend, however, assures you that this is different. He works by money laundering, helps get the dollars back to Mexico, and is handsomely rewarded for it. Has some insurance if you got caught. Your family in Mexico will be financially secured. But this also was a threat, since if they could help your family, they could also kill them if you talked. What's different about this job, your friend explains, is that it's low risk, and the associates want to actually avoid interacting with you. Therefore, it's unlikely you'll be collateral damage in a war. But what convinced you the most was the claim that working in this job didn't last very long, and you could get out any time you wanted. This seemed too good to be true, but your friend explained that they didn't want a single person in this position for too long since it would compromise their operation. Your plan was to work for a few months, make a small fortune in the process, return to Mexico, open a business, perhaps a seafood restaurant by the seashore. And so you foolishly accepted, for you told yourself the lot of man is to gamble with risk. This is where you met the gringa Christie. She was about a foot taller than you, blonde and blue eyed. She was erotic, but not beautiful. Her voluptuous body made you attractive, but the diet of American trash, high in sugar, did bring down her look somewhat. There was a difference, you thought, between the curves of a Mexican woman who was plump with a healthy diet of lean meat, vegetables, and fruits, versus the Americans and their cheeseburgers, chips, and endless intake of sugar. Christie worked at a church, and in there she served to cook the books for the money you brought in and out. It wasn't long before she fell in love with you, and you two were getting physical on a regular basis. Instead of coffee breaks, you two would have a quickie in the closet. This became very exciting for you both, the attraction of the exotic, for you had never been with an American, or she was a Mexican. She soon wanted you two to become official, which you agreed to and was loyal for many months. As your money began to build, however, thoughts about returning home plagued you. These made you miss Mexico, which led you to start seeking the company of Mexicans again, which is how you met Laura. She was a cashier at a Mexican store you often visited. You two would flirt as you paid, and she eventually invited you to a party which you attended. Having been absent for so long made you remember how much you needed to be around your own people. There's a layer of communication with those who share the same language and culture. Voice intonations, hand and facial expressions, jokes, shared experiences, and entertainment, etc. These made conversation a pleasure, and a sense of belonging washed away the loneliness you hadn't realized you felt. Laura made you immensely happy, and you wanted her to become the mother of your children. You confessed this to her, told her you had gathered enough money to go back to Mexico and rebuild your life there. You asked her to be your wife. She loved you back and told you she accepted and would be yours. You told your friend who hooked you up in the business that you wanted out, and he hugged you and told you there was no problem. He would come visit you when your restaurant was open, and if you ever needed a favor, not to hesitate to ask him. With all this done, you made preparations to leave. You met Christy in a parking lot at night and handed her a backpack full of cash. You thanked her for everything, told her that there was enough money in there for her to rebuild her life, and you will be leaving for Mexico. With this, she got rather upset. She told you you couldn't do this to her, that you had promised her you two would someday get married, but it was a matter of time and of simply waiting. What would her family, who she had already told about their relationship, think about this? You couldn't do this to her. You shrugged. told her you love someone else, reminded her that there's more money in there, in that backpack, than was originally promised, and she could go anywhere and remake her life. Let this be a lesson to her, and you'll be on your way. With tears in her eyes, she kept repeating, "You can't do this to me. You can't do this to me." As the sadness in her voice began to change into hatred. Oh, Marcos, my dear, dear friend, I told you not to get involved with these American women. Their whole society and moral system is as fake as their food. They claim they want equality, but what they want is a caste system where you are their domesticated dog to be carried in their purse and waggle your tail with the scraps of food she throws under the table. She didn't want to love a man, she wanted a pet to own. For she has been trained since infancy to regard men as evil unless they're submissive to her. Her whole fake moral construct of the world is based on you being their domesticated house pet. They'll claim it's racist if you enter the US and your Spanish name isn't pronounced correctly, but also claim that your language is fundamentally evil and the term Latino needs to be changed to Latinx with an X. They'll claim they celebrate your culture, but they're only interested in the superficial, sterile, safe, and castrated parody of it. They like the safe food, the safe clothing, the safe music, but the moment your real culture comes out, they cry in terror and call you names. Their social media companies tell you how to speak your own language and censor what they don't like. Their sports organizations tell you what chants you can do in their stadiums. Their schools celebrate their manufactured, castrated parody of who your people are. They'll tell us colonialism ended and we are their equals. But only as long as we submit to their view of the world and morality while accepting a lower status to them, which is exactly what colonialism aimed for. How many of these people who claim to love us and be on our side do you think will accept our bullfights and cockfights? They say they like our food, but will they eat our tacos of tongue, face, intestines, or brains? Will they go to Mexico City and eat a pizza with grasshoppers? Or escamoles, a dish made from ant eggs? Most of them don't like our Catholic religion, and El Dia de los Muertos is nothing but a Mexican version of Halloween to them, intended to be a game. Your identity as a man is sexist, and instead you should take up their version of masculinity. The dog that doesn't compete against their master and will only bark if their master allows it. They say the virtues of Mexican masculinity is toxic and immoral, and claim the good man is the feminine man who serves them. Look at how disgusting and contradictory their worldview is. Men are sexist if they vote for a political candidate of their same sex, but women are expected and celebrate voting for political candidates of their same sex. Masculinity is toxic if held by a man, but it's perfectly fine if the movie character displaying the same sex, the same traits, the same behavior is played by a woman. And they claim this to be empowering when this happens. They'll complain there's too many men in the workplace, but only if its management or an industry they want an unfair advantage in. They don't campaign for women's representation to increase in construction, trash collection, truck driving, etc. Look at how they talk about men in the tech industry. There's nothing stopping women from developing the skills to be a programmer, and yet, most of these are men. Men who spent a huge chunk of their free time learning the skills that benefit the whole world, instead of being grateful and celebrating their sacrifice of this huge portion of their lives and improving those of others. They're slandered as sexist because how dare they have testicles and work hard to develop skill sets for a career that pays well. Marcos, this is the goddamn madness you got involved in when accepting the advances of Christie the American. In her mind, there's no objective morality, and everything good or bad revolves around what makes her feel good or bad. She dumped the man she was seeing to be with you, and justified it by slandering him and simply saying he didn't make her happy. So he was to be disposed. All her friends agreed that this was to be done. She should look out for herself and her happiness. But when you found happiness with Laura, she decided that you were a villain for not being the domesticated dog waggling her tail at her. And because you hurt her little feelings, you didn't even have the right to live anymore. And this was the opinion of the woman who told you she felt pity at the violation of human rights her country engaged in for having a border. But she ended your life because you refused to love her against your will. She took a gun from her purse, aimed at you, and with pure hatred in her eyes shot you dead. She took the money you had given her as a parting gift and lived the rest of her life with the belief that you had been evil, she was good, and your murder was justified.